Did you know that Gorr is the reason Thor stopped being worthy? This would give Jane Foster the chance to pick up the magic hammer and become the mighty Thor. Stick around and I'll give you a brief history of Gorr as well as reviewing the Hasbro figure released based on this character. And if you stick with me all the way to the end, then I'll give you some ideas of what we might see in the upcoming Thor Love and Thunder based on Gorr's history. Throughout Thor's adventures, so many of his stories would involve whether or not he was worthy to wield the awesome power that is Mjolnir. Few villains would truly put Thor to this test the way that Gorr the God Butcher would. Created in November 2012 in issue number 2 of Thor, God of Thunder by Jason Aaron, we would see a very young Thor without his famous hammer. He would first find a severed head and realize that it was actually the head of a fellow god. A few pages later, he would meet Gorr himself. Thor would manage to land a few strikes on Gorr, but Gorr proved to be a more experienced and ferocious villain than young Thor had faced so far. Gorr was prepared to deliver the killing blow before Thor was saved by a strike of thunder. As the story progresses, we would see both present-day Thor and a future King Thor also addressing situations related to Gorr. We would learn that Gorr was from a race of beings that were highly religious and faithful to their gods. Despite many prayers to their gods, Gorr continued to question their existence. His parents died while he was young, his wife murdered, and soon after his son would be too. He would be cast out by his own people when he denounced the gods for never coming to help them. While heavily dehydrated and dying, Gorr would come across two beings that had fallen from the sky while fighting each other. These were the gods that Gorr believed he and so many others prayed to. But when one of them reached out to Gorr and pleaded for Gorr's help, he came to the realization that if the gods really didn't care for their people, then there didn't need to be any gods at all. Gorr would take the weapon from the black armored god and kill the other. The weapon he obtained would be called All Black, the Necro Sword. It would give Gorr a host of abilities, including transforming into any weapon he desires, super strength, immortality, and of course the ability to kill gods. With this weapon now a part of him, he would then set off on his dark path. Gorr slew countless gods across the universe for thousands of years, but it wasn't enough for him. He wanted to be rid of all gods. He would travel to the future and created what he called the God Bomb that would be able to kill all gods throughout time and space. It would take the united efforts of present-day Thor, young Thor, and King Thor to bring down Gorr and stop the bomb before it could cause too much damage. Present-day Thor would use Mjolnir from his future counterpart as well as his own simultaneously to destroy the God Bomb. While Thor would be able to overcome Gorr, Gorr would also be the reason for Thor to stop being worthy, which would give Jane Foster the opportunity to show the world what she could do with the power of Thor. We would much later learn that All Black the Necro Sword was actually the sword of Null, the god of symbiotes. Null would eventually reclaim the Necro Sword during his attempt to destroy Venom and Earth's heroes. Gorr is being brought to life by Christian Bale in the upcoming Thor Love and Thunder. So far in the trailers, we do see Gorr wielding an all-black sword, though its appearance greatly differs from what we see in the comics. Give this video a thumbs up if you think Thor will be able to take down the Batman. Otherwise, stay tuned for the review. Marvel Legends Gorr. This is the first time we're seeing this character in toy form, at least from Hasbro. I don't know if there's ever been a version released by any other company. I suspect not. We have the art, both sides. That looks pretty close to, I think, what we've seen in the trailers. And the likeness of Christian Bale is very strong, I would say. Bath character, of course. This one is the right leg. Mine came a little bit crushed, but not a big deal since I'm gonna open it anyway. Let's get them open. And we have Gorr as seen in the trailers. Whoa. His legs are backwards. That's weird. I wasn't expecting that. Let's go ahead and flip these around. Oh, his whole waist is backwards. Wow, that was unexpected. Okay. And then the feet. There we go. That makes more sense. Alright. Alright, Christian Bale. So we have black tips on his fingers. Looks like he's wearing like sweatpants. And then his cloak comes off. There's no direct attachment of the cloak. This may be hard to see on camera, but you can kind of see the texture of the fabric. The first I can recall of any figure having like textured fabric is Doctor Doom. That's a great figure, and I think the first time that they did it, and they've continued to do it, which I'm really appreciative of. Got these two things on the side, which I guess are just part of how it wraps around his body. Articulation is probably going to be pretty standard for the arms. You can see it's double jointed. I don't think that it'll be too much of an issue to pose above his shoulder, since this kind of moves out of the way anyway. But we'll just, there we go, it's fine. Head sculpt wise, looks amazing. That looks super good. Not just because of how much it looks like Christian Bale, but due to all the detail. So the purplish stuff, the veiny stuff, is painted on, and that's a lot of detail to get for such a small amount. And then we have all of the detail on the head, these what appear to be scars, or maybe some kind of religious markings. And we also have the similar markings down the arms. I think this is going to get in the way of a lot of posing, so I think at most he'll be able to kind of squat out, or obviously just stand, but that's probably about it. The other thing I want to check out is the sword. So the sword, this is not a sword mold that we've seen before. They've had a few different swords, but this one is definitely all new. This one looks quite a bit like what we see in the trailer, so I think they clearly took the time to go ahead and just do that instead of reusing what they already have. So not anything super special in terms of the design, other than that it's screen accurate, and for me, I like screen accuracy. Overall, in terms of the figure itself, if you're looking for an accurate looking character, I'd say this is right there with the rest of them. I think Hasbro has been doing a great job for a number of years on making their MCU figures look like their on-screen counterparts. If we're talking about it being a good figure in itself, there's a lot to like with the sword and the textured robes, but the posability on the lower half of the body with the legs isn't really there. So for that part, not so great, but for a MCU character, it's fantastic. I would recommend. So by now, most people know that Marvel does adapt stories from the comic books. Sometimes they do older stories, sometimes they do newer stories. However, we also know that they never really commit to doing it exactly the way they do it in the comic book. I think Gorr's main story of why he becomes what he does will be the same. I also think the sword will come from a somewhat similar origin, but I don't think it'll be from two gods falling from the sky fighting. I believe might be leaks of Gorr's transformation in the movie, but they may or may not be real. However, I do think he will transform in the movie and become way closer to what we see in the comic book versus what we see in the trailers. I think in the trailers what we're seeing is just his initial form, and then I think he'll just gradually morph into the comic version. I also think the God Bomb will be part of what we see in the movie, but if using two hammers is what destroys it, I think it'll be Jane that does it rather than Thor. If that's not what they do to destroy it, then I think they'll do it in the way that Jane defeats a different villain in the comic. She attaches the villain to Mjolnir with a chain and then throws him into the sun. I think she might do that with the God Bomb. And then while all of that's happening, Thor will be fighting Gorr, and obviously will beat him, but I think that he'll have some mental issues coming out of it, meaning that Gorr will have made him question whether or not he's worthy. So I think then Thor will either actually believe himself not to be worthy anymore, or will step back to let Jane carry on his name. Besides that, I think the Necrosword won't have any connection to symbiotes or Venom, because I think Marvel is going to want to stay as far away from that as possible. What did you think of Gorr? Do you think it will cause Thor to stop being worthy? Or do you think I'm completely wrong and need to be told a thing or two about how these movies work? Drop a comment and let me know. If you're interested in having further discussion about Marvel Legends, then head on over to the MLC Facebook group, link below. If you're interested in more Thor videos, then check out some of these.